Welcome to this edition of Security and Compliance Weekly. Our show today is going to focus on security awareness training, that thing that's so important for organizations, but nobody thinks works, everybody hates, and everybody's bored by it. I remember when the mandatory training was all about selecting strong, robust passwords, and lately, the last couple of years, that's been replaced by all sorts of phishing exercises. There was that phase where there was the 20-minute video that got real fancy because companies were selling, look what we can do with graphics. But all in all, not usually most people's favorite topics within organizations. We're going to fix that today. And to help us fix that, joining us today for that discussion, are Kelley Bray and Stephanie Pratt. They both work for a company called Living Security. We've got a lot of ground to cover today. So join us as we continue our journey of tearing down silos and building bridges on Security and Compliance Weekly.
This is a Security Weekly production. And now, it's the show that bridges the requirements of regulations, compliance, and privacy with those of security. Your trusted source for complying with various mandates, building effective programs, and current compliance news. It's time for Security and Compliance Weekly.
Welcome to episode 69 of Security and Compliance Weekly, recorded on April 13th, 2021. I'm your host, Mr. Jeff Mann, and joining me today are my fantastic co-hosts, Ms. Priya Chaudhry, Mr. Josh Marpet, and from an undisclosed remote location, because he's traveling for work, Mr. Scott Lyons. Welcome, everyone.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is going to be a fun show. This is going to be a really fun show. It's a great topic. A lot of people get it wrong, and we're going to try and demystify a lot of what's going on.
And maybe rant a little bit. Before we jump into it, if you want to stay in the loop on all things Security Weekly, you should visit securityweekly.com/subscribe, and there you can subscribe on your favorite podcast catcher, or our YouTube channel, or you can sign up for our mailing list. You can also join our Discord server and our newest live streaming platform. You can follow us on Twitch, which I haven't done yet, and I'm still holding out. All right, so a couple weeks ago, I got a little notice on LinkedIn, or I saw on LinkedIn, some people were talking about security awareness training, and what caught my eye was their tagline for this webinar was how to go beyond the check the box training and change your security culture. And I had decided, sort of in my musings, and I've reflected this in some conference presentations back when I used to do that thing when we had conferences, but it's really about the culture of the company. I grew up and cut my teeth in companies whose business was security, and reflecting on it, culture was what it was easy because the whole organization was about security, but there was absolutely a culture. So that sort of piqued my interest. I listened to the webinar. I think the a link to the webinar is in the notes. You can watch it later after you watch our broadcast. But I reached out to the ladies that had presented, and they graciously accepted my invitation to come on the show today. So without further ado, I am pleased to welcome Kelley Bray. She is the Director of Client Success, and she's a Senior Security Awareness Strategist at Living Security. Welcome, Kelley.
Thank you, Jeff. I'm so excited to be here. I appreciate the warm welcome. I'm looking forward to the questions and digging in a little bit on this one.
Great. And with Kelley is her partner in crime, Stephanie Pratt. Stephanie is a Senior Security Awareness Content Manager at Living Security. Welcome, Stephanie.
Thank you so much. Kelley and I truly are partners in crime, and security and security awareness is a super passion. So I'm excited to be on the show.
Yeah, I think I captured that in some of your on-screen banter, so I must have subliminally picked up on it. We like to start our shows by just spending a few minutes to getting to know our guests, and we'll have to tag team a little bit since there's two of you, but I think you're probably used to the bantering back and forth. But just basically, how'd you get your question generically to each one of you? How'd you get your start in cybersecurity? How'd you end up focused on security awareness training, and ultimately, how'd you end up at Living Security? Kelley, why don't you start?
Oh, thanks. So I didn't get into my start in security was actually with security awareness. I have a background in training and a degree in business. So I found my way about almost 12 years ago now. And that was as a contractor for the federal government. So I really understand the compliance side because I grew up doing security awareness and compliance. And it took me a few minutes to figure out that doing just compliance wasn't going to get it done. So I would say my journey started there. Over the decade, I was with the public and private sector for the last 2.5 years before I joined Living Security. I had the pleasure of building the security culture program at Splunk, which was a great deal of fun and some good challenges. And I was an early adopter as a customer of Living Security's product because I just loved what they had to offer. So last June, I joined the company as the senior strategist, which has been a delight because now I get to work with our clients and learn about their programs and their challenges. And then back in December, I got to work with the client success team. So it's kind of been a varied but fun journey for me so far.
Great. How about you, Stephanie?
My background is actually broadcast journalism. I'm a former TV reporter who eventually stumbled into IT, communications, and change management at a company called Blackbaud. And they realized they didn't have a security awareness program. They had a strong security program, but basically they said, "Hey, would you like to think about this?" And I stumbled into it, and I loved it instantly. I love learning about and digging into security, and I love security awareness because I think it really is bringing an important topic and what sometimes comes across as a complex topic to everyone. And I love making just leveling that playing field. I ended up at Living Security in November. And although I loved my program and loved connecting with people, my favorite parts of the program were, again, making it fun, making it approachable. And the least favorite parts were the compliance. We're sitting in all the audits. We're going through all the spreadsheets. So by joining Living Security, I get to do the fun stuff and the people connecting and the breaking it down.
Very interesting. And I caution you, watch what you say about compliance, especially PCI, because it's kind of a thing around here. We like to also ask our guests what we call the hot seat question, and this is simply because we're a show that's focusing not only on security but also on compliance, and we understand and acknowledge that there's sometimes not a lot of love lost between the two things. We just try to get a little bit of an idea of where you're coming from. There's no right or wrong answer, but our hot seat question is simply, where do you fall? What's your opinion of this, what we call the security versus compliance continuum? Stephanie, why don't you go first this time?
So I think compliance is really important, and I think it's the cornerstone of any security awareness program. That's the whole point of your program. You have to meet that compliance. So it's important. I think the challenge is that in the past, they did it in the not a creative way. You have to meet the compliance. You're forcing people through this awful, long, boring training. And so I think getting to the security awareness or the security side, there's, a way to get to compliance without making it boring and forcing people to do things they don't want to do.
Gotcha. Kelley?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think the compliance pieces, to Stephanie's point, have to be there. We have to be able to operate in a marketplace. So full stop, end of the day, that's what you have to do, is make sure that that's done. Unfortunately, I think over time, there was just a miss in explaining throughout an organization of why security awareness was necessary and what the greater, population within an organization had to do to contribute to that and what they needed to learn and understand. So for me, I think compliance is absolutely critical, but I think just as critical is making sure that you find a way to change behavior and build it into culture so it's not seen as the enemy, or like Stephanie says, the no police. There's got to be ways that we can do that better, which is what we're so passionate about.
And maybe just to add on a little bit there, it's like they all need to work together. So it's about building relationships. You need compliance. You need your true security team. You need security awareness, all to work together.
Well, a quick question, and I'm probably making an assumption here, but in the form of a question, I think we're picking up on the fact that you both work for Living Security is a company that provides security awareness training.
Oh my God, seriously?
Solutions. Are you typically, as an organization, hired by people from the security group or people from the compliance group, or is there a mix? And does it matter?
Depends on the size of the organization, Jeff, honestly. When I started doing security awareness, I was a compliance person, and it was, 18% of my job at best, which still happens in a lot of organizations. So depending on the size, I think the complexity of the audit requirements and all of those things, if there's, I would say two things: budget, and before that, leadership buy-in to prioritize security awareness, then you get to work with that specific program owner. But we work with a lot of leaders of GRC within organizations, and people going, okay, I know I have to hit my audit, but I also know based on what I'm seeing coming out of our SOC, that nobody's actually learning anything, or there are pockets of where we need to train them more, because what we're providing just for compliance is not necessarily getting it done.
Gotcha. Before I took on the security awareness program, our security operations team ran security training. So back to Kelley's point, the security awareness is newer in the industry, and not everybody has a program.
Say that again.
Good point. Not everybody has a program.
Not everyone has a program. Security awareness is newer in the industry. Some teams don't have a dedicated team.
Especially smaller companies, small to medium companies don't have dedicated. They don't have anything. Let's be honest. Right. A lot of them, anyway, I should say that. There are SaaS services that have arisen, competitors to yourself as well as yourself, for small to medium companies. But there's so many companies out there that have absolutely nothing. And it's really scary, considering how much information that these small companies have access to, and how little information they're getting in terms of security awareness training.
Well, I think a big part of that is for a lot of small companies, because of their budget concerns, they want to do everything they need to by law. So that, for example, in New York now, you have to do mandatory sexual harassment training. And if you don't do it, it's actually going to be a punish for your business. Everything else that's not required becomes sort of like an extra expense. And so to connect with businesses of why, even though you might not be required to do this, from a legal point of view, you are required to do this from a success point of view, that message really needs to get out there, because I don't see companies investing especially the smaller shops you get, even professional shops. I don't see them investing in this unless they have bought into the concept that this is a requirement if I want my business to succeed and avoid, being taken hostage.
Priya, actually, can I expand on that?
Human risk.
Wait, Josh, let them respond.
Human risk is probably one of your...
A revenue center.
What was that?
How is security awareness training a revenue center, not a cost center?
I love that question.
Yeah. I'm going to pivot. I don't know how to answer that, but what I will say is that what the problem is that what you should be looking at, this is human risk. This isn't like nice to have fun training, and we're talking to people about just some other program at your organization. We're spending tons, millions of dollars on all of these different tools to stop phishing. And, this is as important a tool, but, you can't be mad at your users for not doing the right things if you didn't tell them what the right things were in the first place. So it's stopping. Human risk is huge. And so by having these programs, by talking about this, by meeting your compliance things, you're decreasing the risk at your organization, which will make you more revenue, and it will make customers trust you. And it's just good for business.
I totally agree with that.
I think the last part of that is exactly right. If part of your brand and what you can guarantee to the customer is we are interested, invested, and ahead of the game on this, you can trust us. That does go a long way. And I think for someone picking between Apple company A, Apple company B, I meant Apple, not like the computer company, but like apples to apples. If one of them is a company where they have no security events, that they are fully invested in compliance, why wouldn't you go with that one, right? If I'm a customer, I would rather do that.
You said a minute ago, Priya, if you don't mind, what I liked when you said get ahead of it, I think as the question was originally asked, I believe that security awareness trainings, historically, the investments that I've seen have been very reactive. I would bet right now, SolarWinds has a brilliant security awareness program. And I don't mean to throw them under the bus. There's every other day, there's another hack, right? And so many of them, they're not, I don't even want to give technical references because I'll embarrass myself, but predominantly it's a phish, it's a bad password that it's very much a human behavior related thing. And it then goes from, we agreed upon it ahead of time, to project fundraiser after the fact, and then having to fix the brand and the customer trust and all of those pieces. So that's one of the things that I see to the point about how do we sit on the revenue center rather than the cost, is I would imagine over time, quantify how much it costs to, for any kind of a breach. It's a lot cheaper to invest in a decent program and test your users and make sure they're happy and they understand why it's important to them. So it might not be a direct one-to-one, but I think there's definitely an argument to be made there for how we support sales and trust and increase revenue versus sit in the cost center when things go sour.
Okay, I want to expand on that. I really do. This is exciting. Sorry. So you're saying that if you invest, and I'm going to make numbers up, bear with me for a second. If you executives invest $50,000 in security awareness training, you lower your human risk. I like that, by the way. Thank you. Lovely, lovely verbiage there. You lower your human risk by the potentiality of not losing $10 million. Again, I'm making numbers up. So they go, yes, but it's a guaranteed $50,000 I'm going to spend, and it's a maybe $10 million I'm going to lose. How do you answer that type of question when you get asked to justify your cost? And I hope this is not a horrible question.
It's a great question.
No. I think you can start with compliance, back to the whole point of this. You have to meet those compliance requirements. So security awareness is part of that. And then adding on to that, you are, your security awareness program will be tracking metrics, right? You're going to track, are they clicking on phishing emails? Are they reporting phishing emails? Are they reporting other suspicious things? So you can track it and you can show the return on investment by showing that you're decreasing that human risk.
Agree. And I would add that and I actually really do love this question. You could have a whole session just on the revenue piece. So that's interesting to me. But it
is, isn't it? Sorry.
It is. when you make the initial investment in security awareness, I think what's exciting about that is compliance for the most part is going to be, I don't want to say repetitive, but the NIST controls haven't changed dramatically over the course of my career. We know the things that we have to meet, right? But behaviors change, inputs change, technologies change, users change, corporate culture changes. So investing in the program itself, not just the tool, that's really just, kind of one thing in your arsenal. But for us, when you make an investment in the program, you're investing in the agility to meet your users where they are and bring the pieces of the tools and the training content and the messaging and all of those together to your users to really make sure it's meaningful, and then pivot as you need to constantly go after the riskiest groups rather than just, we're going to give everybody the same training every year. And whether they like it or not, so be it. At least we did what we had to do, which sometimes smaller organizations don't have an option. They have limited budgets. They do what they can with what they got. But for us, that investment is where it is. It's not just in what needs to be taught, but the level of creativity with which people like Stephanie and I have been able to employ in our programs, which does reduce human risk.
Okay, so now we're saying that the investment in the security awareness training program, followed by metrics to show how that investment is paying off, is the actual revenue or no, it's the valuation of the investment as it moves along in time. So what you're doing is you're saying it's not just the security awareness training, it's also the metrics of how that investment pays off. And that, I think, is an important differentiator.
I think that's right. And I also think it is a core culture changer, right?
Yes.
A shop that has a small company, any size company that has part of its corporate culture, we are all, if not tech savvy, but tech conscious and security minded. And that's part of anybody who comes here has to know that that's what we do. And everybody here sort of celebrates that we're not afraid of it, that we're on top of it. And I think that's a huge selling point. And then if you wanted to really look at revenue, you just give somebody the apples to apples comparison. I have to pick another oranges to oranges comparison of the companies that have invested in your training versus their twins that didn't, and looking at what the cost of a security breach or a compliance breach for those other companies were. And it's just clear, right? And then especially if you as Josh suggested, you take it out over time. and you say, it almost becomes like a 401k, and it grows. Like the amount of awareness, the amount of proactivity, the amount of interest from the end users who are your human risk people, and they've bought in, I think it would be tremendous, right? I think it sounds like a great idea.
If you look at the amount of money that your company is spending to protect laptops at your organization, just the laptops, right? The amount of money you're spending there versus the actual people working on the laptops, the chart is like completely different. And you don't have to spend a ton of money on security awareness to have a huge impact and change that culture at your organization.
So can I ask you guys this? So we didn't script out what we're going to say or ask you. So I don't know if this is an appropriate question. So now everybody's excited to hear what I'm going to say. You can look at the other hosts of this podcast, and I would say most people in the cybersecurity compliance area are going to be men. And I see that you two are women, and your role is a very interesting one because you're sort of marrying the technical side with the ability to communicate, persuade, and get people to sort of sign up side. Do you know if your companies made an intentional choice to pick women for these roles so that the message wouldn't be coming from the tech guy who's going to maybe bore us or lock us in a room and give us some lecture that none of us will understand because we're not tech people? I just think it's a brilliant choice, and I'm wondering if that was
might have something to do with who owns the company. Why don't you
well, I was going to say, no offense to Jeff. There are 50% of Living Security is female, so exactly half of our company. So it just works out by default that Stephanie and I are both women, but I don't think that either one of us were sought after for that attribute. It's a really important piece of Living Security's culture. And we work for a very strong, brilliant, powerful CEO, and she supports us in our role. So that's definitely something I think that contributes to our passion. Although Stephanie and I, like from a career standpoint, love what we do. When you get the ability to take what you know and deliver it in a way that you know is meaningful and valuable and personal, sky's the limit. So Ashley's our CEO. She's been wonderful for that.
I also think that's a great question. If you just look at the security industry, there is so much opportunity right now, so many jobs that are unfilled. And it's exciting to look at the younger groups of women and men coming through and trying to encourage them to look at STEM, to look at cybersecurity. I'm a mom. I go and I speak at my kids' schools and I tell them about, security. And I think a lot of them don't even ever think about that. So I think, and it's somewhere we all have to get to in tech. We're trying to get more diversity in every way. But I think what has happened in the past is that women typically come from those softer skill roles. And so that's how, I got into security awareness. But in the future, and at my last company, you're seeing more and more women in these like super highly technical and executive leadership roles. And it's awesome.
I want to jump in because, I am the man literally in the room and make
just because it's your comment. Name. You had nothing to do with that. Come on.
Man, totally play that card.
Literally
play that card.
That mic check.
But, it's certainly something I've noticed in my place in my career where I'm trying to, promote education and awareness and training. I mean, that's one of the reasons why we do this podcast and Security Weekly in general. We're all about teaching and educating people, and we're equal opportunity in that sense. But there's certainly been a history of, and I have 3 daughters and 3 granddaughters, so I'm acutely aware of the, and have very heated, interesting discussions with my daughters in particular about gender roles and things like that. But I definitely agree that there's a tendency towards women to go towards, how'd you describe it, the softer skills within the industry. It seems like it's an easier way in. Although I
think it's
have you ever taught a damn class?
As young...
No. That conversation is over.
Let me
I teach all the time, and it is one of the hardest possible things to do, far harder than most anything else in security or compliance. It is an amazingly difficult task. And to be very honest with you, that was incredibly horrible what you just said. I'm terribly sorry, and forgive me, ladies, if this is wrong or rude of me. But
to what are you referring, though? You lost me.
You said it's an easier way in?
I said it's the perception. I was trying to echo what Stephanie said.
Oh, okay, good. I apologize for my outburst. Forgive me.
Because what I was about to say was, but I know lots of women in all sorts of different aspects, especially within the technical side of things. I think part of the problem, Josh, in terms of the perception, is that there is these perceptions, if that makes sense.
I completely agree with that. I'm going to jump to your defense, Jeff, and that I think, if you look at companies, because of all of the historical, sort of prejudices and biases we have, women in companies are usually in lower roles, right? Whether it's secretarial or, vice president to the president, whatever it is, but the lower roles generally go to women. And, there is a perception often in big companies that the people in the lower roles don't carry as much risk, right? Like they're just the secretary or they're just the assistant or whatever. But as we're discussing here, everybody who has access to your computers carries a lot of risk, maybe not equal risk, because maybe somebody has access to a little bit more information. But the idea of packaging this information to make sure that everybody not just understands it, but buys in and understands the significance of their role in this enterprise, I think is critical, right? And I think whatever perception people have, whether it's their own or someone has told them that they're, I'm not good at computers, I'm not a tech person, whatever. I'm a trial lawyer, and one of the things that we all discuss is 70% of communication is nonverbal. And having, a company that is half women come in and deliver a very technical message and training, part of what you're saying is this is for everyone. Right? Security is not just for the CEOs or the people in the big jobs or men or whatever. It's for everybody. It's accessible, it's important, and we can all become masters of this. And I love that.
100%.
I think one of the things Kelley and I both feel passionate about is role-based training. To talk to people about, there is that perception of like, oh, well, I'm not a risk. And maybe there's just a focus on the privileged users or the admins. But we really feel passionately about talking about all of the different roles and how you could be a risk and a target at your organization.
Yeah, we spend a lot of time when we're working with our clients, and I did in the past when I was run programs explaining why. Like, there's a perception that I'm not that interesting. Before doing this job, it's like nobody cares about me. I'm just Kelley Bray. Like, I'm a normal person. I'm a mom. I go to work every day. Used to go to work every day. Now I walk downstairs and sit in front of a Zoom all day. But whatever it might be, I don't have that many things about me that any sort of adversary or hacker or other would find very interesting. And that transcends into everybody in a workplace environment. There's an assumption that the technology, I think there's this thing called a firewall. So I think we're good, or that the technology is there as this invisible barrier. So it's not necessarily, unless you explain why it's a priority and why you are interesting and important in an organization, no matter where you are, and therefore attractive to somebody who might be trying to get into your organization. I just think it just doesn't cross anybody's mind. So it's really important to us to be able to have that relatability on the conversation. Stephanie's better at that than anybody I know.
Well, let me jump in real quick.
Go
ahead, Scott, real quick.
Well, I was going to say that what you just pointed out is not just specific to businesses. That is actually echoed in general everyday public. When we as security professionals go to people and they say, oh, you seem interesting, What do you do? And we say, well, we deal with security. We work with hackers. And oh yeah, well, a hacker, what are you going to do? You're going to empty my already non-existent and empty bank account? Please hack my bank, put money in the account, and I have to sit back and say, no, it doesn't work like that. Hackers
why would I
aren't
put it in
just
your
out there
account?
to go after
I put it in my
right?
account.
And I'll say one of the fights that I had to have constantly at my last job is I would focus a lot of our trainings on security in everyday life. So like we all have our phones, you can't see mine, but we all have tech in our everyday lives. And if you can get people to care about security at home and care about what they're doing there, they're going to bring the good habits back to work.
And to counter what Josh said earlier about it's only smalls and mediums, that's not true. Large enterprises also have this problem. When I worked for Discovery, we had a hell of a time trying to teach people about security. And what we did was when we were going through intern interviews, I had an intern that literally wrote me a poem inside of the thank you email. And when that intern came in, every week for their internship, they were doing a different poem about security. So one week it's iambic pentameter, another week it's a haiku, another week it's whatever. But then we cataloged them up, had the on-site staff print them, and then distributed it out to the entire company. So getting creative with how you deliver this is also a very key point that I think we're missing right now. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. It's so important to both of us. I mean, I think because compliance is so, it's very prescriptive. There's been, I guess, a misunderstanding or an assumption that training and awareness also have to be very prescriptive. And there isn't one that exists. There's no plan that says you must train people via boring PowerPoint for 30 minutes per year. You can do it however you want. And that's why I think if you take a kind of a people-centric approach to it, go, I'm going to sit back in a new organization and listen. What do my employees care about? What do they hate? Let's take a look at some of the other trainings. Are they successful? What audiences are we competing with for time? What events are coming up? And then again, to Stephanie's piece for relatability, you take that back to, at the end of the day, I'm going to protect my children and my finances first. I don't care how much I love my job. You teach people how to do that and how those security behaviors are important. You can make incremental change by building trust, just by having a meaningful program that's a little bit different maybe than what else is going on in the organization.
What I'm finding fascinating about this discussion, and I want to try to kind of wrap it up at least for this first segment, but we went off on this tangent of gender for a little bit, but what I keep thinking about is training's been around for years. We all hate it. We all think it's meaningless. Again, perception, Josh. It's the necessary evil. I had even written in my notes just the use of the term mandatory and how it makes people kind of, brace themselves. But, we're talking historically that the majority of the people that we're talking about are male. I feel like we need to note to all the co-hosts, we need to dedicate a conversation sometime on one of our shows about the impact of gender in our workforce and how women are really just going to take over because they just have that much of a different approach because they see things differently. And I'm all for them taking a shot at it because, us guys have made much of the mess that exists. Want to take a quick break, come back and reset the discussion and hopefully transition to the whole concept of culture. So let's take a quick break and we'll be right back.